Objection. There is objection. And that brings to a close questions for oral answer today. Order. 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 I'm on my feet. Honourable members, I have received a letter from Darian Fenton seeking to debate under Standing Order 386 the release of the report of the Royal Commission on the Pike River coal mine tragedy, the release of the government's response to it and the resignation of the Minister of Labour, the Honourable Kate Wilkinson. This is a particular case of recent occurrence for which there is ministerial responsibility and that warrants the immediate attention of the House by way of an urgent debate. I call on Darian Fenton to move that the House take note of a matter of urgent public importance. Darian Fenton.
Mr. Speaker.
Darian Fenton.
I so move. Firstly,
Order. I want to hear Darian Fenton.
Firstly, I note with sadness again the needless death of 29 men that awful day nearly 2 years ago at Pike River Mine. My thoughts and the thoughts of the Labour Party go out to the families whose lives have been broken by this tragedy. Their heartbreak is inconsolable. Their courage is immense. After they were told the findings of the Royal Commission's report yesterday, they said that they hope good will come from this tragedy, that the legacy of the loss of the men will be that we do something about our appalling health and safety record, not only in mines but across the country. That is the job of the government, Mr. Speaker, and the government needs to adopt all of the recommendations of the Pike River Mine Commission without delay and extend them to all workplaces. The ex-Minister of Labour and John Key can blame the Department of Labour, and there's been a lot of that going around in the last 24 hours. They can try to shift responsibility onto the overworked and unresourced staff, but that's not good enough. It is good that the Ministers stepped down over this. She should. John Key says it's the honourable thing to do. Kate Wilkinson says it's about her integrity. But this isn't about the Minister, Mr. Speaker. It's not about her. She stood on the stage with the Prime Minister at the memorial for the Pike River mine deaths next to Peter Whittle. She wanted to be part of that, but she's wanted no part in making the real change that was needed. It's been almost 2 years since this tragedy happened. I do believe that eventually Kate Wilkinson became very concerned about health and safety. She was laissez-faire about it to start with, and as John Armstrong has described, she was the ultimate deregulator. She was a born-again deregulator, but she has eventually come around to it by setting up the task force to look into health and safety in New Zealand because of our alarming record of deaths and injuries in this country. So Pike River Mine, the deaths of 29 men are just part of this picture. Something changed her mind. She was telling the EPMU back on the 12th of November 2009, in response to the consultation around underground mining that my colleague Trevor Mallard, the former Minister of Labour, set up, around underground mining, not small mines, which she narrowed to apply to only small mines. And what she said in the letter to the EPMU was that she considers an educational rather than a regulatory approach as appropriate to support small mine operators, and that she considers that the existing legislative framework under the Health and Safety and Employment Act 1992 already provides a good basis for effective employee participation, and that she does not agree to regulatory change to introduce check inspectors, nor for an approved code of practice for employee participation in the mining sector. So she had a chance back in 2009 to respond to some work that had been done, to respond to some work that was initiated by Labour, consultation. She had a chance to do something, and she told the miners' union that she did not agree to it. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, before the Pike River Mine tragedy. And that Minister, Jerry Brownlee, stood in this House and mocked that consultation document. He held it up with a picture of Damien O'Connor, who is from the West Coast, who's had to live through this tragedy and work with the families, with Trevor Mallard and with an EPMU delegate. He held it up and he mocked it. Shame on that minister. He mocked it. He mocked it. He mocked it. And that shows you the attitude of this government to health and safety, to mine safety, and it's all very well 3 years later, 29 deaths later, to be saying we're going to do something about it. And at the same time, going back, the government was busy making cuts to the Department of Labour, to health and safety and employee representative training. I remember asking the former ACC minister, who's responsible for prevention, I remember asking him about why they were cutting worker participation, why they were making millions of dollars worth of cuts to the training of health and safety reps on the job, those workers on the job who are entitled to have a voice, who are entitled to have a say, who are entitled to stand up for their safety on the job. And you know what he said? Oh, that's a touchy-feely notion. That's a touchy-feely notion. That is disgraceful, and I don't believe that that minister has changed as well. In June 2010, 5 months before the fatal explosion, Kate Wilkinson wrote to my colleague Damien O'Connor, who raised his genuine and serious concern about mine safety on the West Coast, saying that she did not see a need for any review of the current mines inspection regime. And, you know, she kept saying it time after time after time. Let's look at the cuts that the government made to workplace health and safety. Let's look at the cuts that they made. They cut the ACC-funded training for workplace health and safety by $1.5 million. They ran the Department of Labour down. They ran the Department of Labour down to the point where there was only one inspector, one mines inspector for the whole of the country. The whole of the country. And the department had a vacancy and couldn't find a replacement because they don't pay enough. And that inspector was also responsible for checking the 1,000 or so quarries throughout New Zealand, and he said they had not been inspected for ages, so goodness knows what's been going on there. And he said that safety issues at Pike River were difficult to address because inspectors only visited the mine occasionally. And what we found out through questioning is those inspectors could not even get the money, the travel allowance, the travel cost, to travel to mines to carry out the inspection. So stingy had this government become, so mean and so focused on cost-cutting that they denied the travel allowance to the mine inspector to go and inspect the mines. Now, at that time, when that evidence was given to the Pike River Royal Commission, the minister was called on to resign. And because she was called on to resign because she discounted the proposals that were put forward arising from the consultation document and review by my colleague Trevor Mallard. She discounted them. She wrote to the EPMU saying they weren't necessary. She narrowed the inquiry into small mines, and she did nothing. And so there were calls on her then to resign. And you know what she said? I have no intention of resigning. I have no intention of resigning. So she was confident back then that she had done everything for this mine. Now she's not, of course, because we all know the terrible, terrible story that has come out of this Pike River Mine Commission. We've gone from having something like 9,735 workplace health and safety reps trained in the workplace in 2008 to half that in 2010-11, and it's continued to drop. And yet, what did the Pike Commission of Inquiry say? One of the most important things about workplace health and safety is employee participation. Employee participation. They also scrapped industry training funding for health and safety courses. So more money out of $9.5 million taken out of that. That costs people's lives. And the Employment Relations Contestable Fund, was cut by 40% in Budget 2010, and much of that was being used for health and safety training. So the families want something good to come from this inquiry. The first thing the government could do is reinstate that funding to get things moving while they muck around thinking and considering implementing the recommendations of the inquiry. Mr. Speaker, New Zealand has a terrible, terrible health, death and injury record. Over 100 people a year die from workplace accidents. Between 700 and 1,000 people die as a result of gradual work-related diseases. Over 6,000 people notify MOBI, what used to be called the Department of Labour, of a serious harm incident in their workplace. Around 190,000 people claim medical costs from ACC as a result of being harmed at work. And around 23,000 people are injured seriously enough to be off work for more than a week. Thank you. And around 370 people are injured seriously enough to require hospital care and be diagnosed with a life-threatening condition. Our injury rates are almost twice that of Australia, and almost 6 times that of the UK. This is a cultural issue, but it's also an attitude issue. And I thank the acting Minister of Labour today for making it very clear in answers to my questions that he does not understand the link between workers' rights. Look at him, pulling faces. That minister does not understand the link between workers' rights, the way they're treated on the job, the confidence they have to raise health and safety issues. Never understood that. And so all of these proposals can be implemented. At the same time, the government is proposing changes to employment law that will take away rights to low-paid cleaners, that will have an impact on the health and safety of every school where there are contracted workers. And I bet the government hasn't told parents that they're about to have their toilets cleaned by franchise companies who are understaffed. And they're also about to weaken collective bargaining, make it harder for workers to get pay increases and so on, until the Minister, I've said this to the former Minister of Labour time and time again, until she gets the understanding that having all of these things, you can have, if you want to, have a mountain of labour inspectors, because that's what you will need, if that's what the government's going to need, if they never get the picture that until workers feel safe enough on the job to raise safety issues, until they're confident enough to be able to do that, until they can join their union and collectively bargain without fear, until we have laws that actually promote that in the good tradition of other countries in the ILO, our health and safety record is going to continue to be a disaster. And so, Mr. Chair, again I want to record our condolences to the families. We know it was a terrible day for them yesterday. I do thank them for their courage and their determination. There is a lot of work to do on this issue. Labour will support, of course, the recommendations being implemented, but we say they need to be done quickly and they need to be done soon, and the government needs to get real about other things that affect workers in the workplace. They need to get real about it in the memory of the 29 men who died at Pike River Mine.
Speaker.
I call the Honourable Minister Chris Finlayson.
That was a very disappointing speech from Darian Fenton. Yesterday, I thought the Leader of the Opposition